The accusation, when it came, was as loud and obnoxious as the man who delivered it. "This man is a fraud." Julian Vance's voice sliced through the sophisticated jazz music and cheerful chatter of our engagement party. He stood in the middle of the rooftop terrace, a self-appointed prophet of doom, pointing a perfectly manicured finger directly at me. The city lights of downtown Atlanta glittered behind him like 1,000 angry eyes, all focused on the spectacle he was determined to create. "Ania, you have no idea who you're about to marry. This man is a broke, pathetic liar, and I have the proof." My fiancée, Ania, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her beautiful face, usually a canvas of warmth and joy, was now pale with shock and confusion. Around us, the conversations of our friends and family died, replaced by a tense, suffocating silence. Everyone turned to stare. Julian, her ex-boyfriend of 3 years, had just crashed the most important night of our lives to call me a fraud. He smiled, a smug, predatory grin that I had come to know all too well. He thought he was about to save the day. He had no idea he was about to burn his entire world to the ground. And I was the one holding the match. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our stories. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in Atlanta, Houston, London, or maybe Lagos? I love seeing our global community. Now let's get back to David and see how this unfolds. The rooftop venue was called The Vantage Point, and it was Ania's dream. Perched atop the 50-story Omni Tower, it offered a breathtaking 360-degree view of the Atlanta skyline. We had booked it months ago, a decision that had caused a small ripple of tension. It was expensive, ostentatious even, and everyone knew it. Ania's mother, a formidable woman named Althea Williams, had made her opinion clear from the start. Althea Williams was 58 years old, a striking black woman whose rich, dark skin seemed to drink in the light and radiate it back with an air of regal authority. Her hair was a crown of elegant silver locks, styled in a sophisticated updo that accentuated her high cheekbones and discerning, deep-set, brown eyes. She believed a person's worth was displayed in their assets and their career, and from her perspective, I didn't have much of either. "David, are you sure you can afford this?" she had asked, her tone dripping with false concern. We wouldn't want Ania to be embarrassed. "I am David Carter, a 35-year-old black man who, to the outside world, was a simple freelance graphic designer. My deep brown skin often made people underestimate my age, and my calm demeanor was frequently mistaken for a lack of ambition. I kept my natural hair in short, neat locks that barely brushed my collar, and a well-trimmed beard framed a jawline that Ania loved to trace with her fingers. I met Althea's gaze with a quiet smile. "It's taken care of, Althea. All I want is for Ania to be happy." Ania, my fiancée, was the center of my universe. At 32, she was a vibrant and brilliant marketing manager for a major beverage company. She was a beautiful black woman with a warm, caramel-toned complexion and a smile that could disarm armies. Tonight, she wore an elegant white dress that shimmered against her skin, and her long box braids, adorned with delicate gold cuffs, cascaded over her shoulders. Her full lips, usually curved in a smile, were pressed into a thin line of anxiety as she watched her ex-boyfriend hijack our celebration. She loved me. I knew that without a doubt. But she was also a woman who had been conditioned to value the very things Julian represented: visible, loud, unapologetic success. And Julian Vance was nothing if not loud. He was 34, a charismatic and undeniably handsome black man with a golden brown complexion that he meticulously maintained. His fade was always razor-sharp, his beard a work of art, and his clothes were tailored to perfection. He was the founder of a tech startup, Innovate AI, and he never missed an opportunity to talk about his funding rounds, his quarterly growth, or his vision for disrupting the industry. He saw me as a gnat, a low-level gig worker who had somehow tricked his brilliant, beautiful ex-fiancée into settling for a life of mediocrity. His presence here was a calculated power play. He hadn't come alone. Flanking him were two of his sycophants. The first was Kevin, a 33-year-old black man with a lighter complexion and a cocky smirk permanently attached to his face. His hair was cut in a low, precise wave pattern. The second was Marcus, not to be confused with my own lawyer, a taller black man of 35 with dark chocolate skin and a frame that suggested he spent more time in the gym than the office. They were his hype men, his backup chorus in the opera of his own ego. "What are you doing here, Julian?" Anaya's voice was shaky, but she took a protective step closer to me, her hand finding mine. Julian ignored her, his eyes locked on me. "I'm here for you, Anaya. I couldn't stand by and watch you make the biggest mistake of your life. I did some digging on your fiancé, David here. I was concerned. I mean, a freelance graphic designer booking out the Vantage Point? It didn't add up." He held up his phone, the screen glowing in the dim evening light. So I looked into him. It turns out your fiancé isn't some secret genius. He's a nobody. He works on one of those cheap freelance websites. I have his profile right here. He angled the screen for everyone to see. A profile page was visible, showing a picture of me, my name, and an hourly rate that was insultingly low. $50 an hour. That's what he thinks he's worth. How, Anaya? How is a man who makes $50 an hour paying for a party that must have cost at least $50,000? A collective gasp went through the crowd. I could feel Althea's eyes burning into the side of my head. Her worst fears, her most cynical assumptions about me, were seemingly being confirmed in the most public way imaginable. I saw her exchange a look with her husband, Robert Williams. Robert was 60, a quiet, dignified black man whose dark complexion was a shade deeper than his wife's. His closely cropped natural hair was flecked with gray at the temples, and he wore a thoughtful expression behind his glasses. Unlike Althea, he had always been civil to me, but I knew he shared his wife's concerns about my financial stability. Now his brow was furrowed with deep disappointment. "Julian, that's enough," Ania said, her voice gaining a bit of strength. "Get out. You're not welcome here." "Not until you hear the truth," Julian projected his voice to the entire party. "He's not just broke, he's a liar. He's probably drowning in debt. He's using you, Ania. He sees your success, your salary, and he's latched onto you like a parasite. He's a burden, a charity case." The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. Charity case. The same term Althea had used in a hushed, angry phone call with Ania that I had accidentally overheard a few months ago. The sting of it was familiar. I squeezed Ania's hand gently, a silent signal for her to stay calm, to trust me. My own heart was beating a steady, rhythmic drum. This was not a surprise. It was an inevitability. For 3 years, I had been patient. I had endured the subtle digs, the condescending questions, and the outright dismissals from her family and her insecure ex. I did it all for Anaya, to give her time to see me for who I was, not what her family wanted me to be. But patience has a purpose, and tonight, that purpose was about to be fulfilled. I let the silence stretch for a moment, letting Julian bask in what he believed was his triumph. I watched the faces in the crowd, the pity, the second-hand embarrassment, the flicker of doubt in the eyes of our friends. I saw Anaya's brother, Derek Williams, shift uncomfortably. Derek was 28, a young black professional with his father's dark complexion and a fresh fade that was always lined up. He worked in finance and understood the language of money better than anyone in his family. He looked from Julian's phone to my calm face, and I could see the gears turning in his head. Something wasn't adding up for him either. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a simple, discreet vibration. I knew who it was. It was a text from my actual Marcus, my lawyer and best friend, who was standing quietly near the terrace bar. The text read, "Ready when you are." I looked at Julian, who was still puffing out his chest like a victorious peacock. "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice even and calm. The question seemed to disarm him. "What?" "Are you finished with your presentation?" I clarified. "It was very thorough. You brought visuals and everything. I'm impressed." My lack of panic was clearly not the reaction he was expecting. It threw him off balance. "Don't get smart with me, man. I'm trying to help the woman I still care about. This is a sham. You're a sham." He turned his attention back to the crowd, raising his voice again. "This whole party, this ring, this fancy venue, it's all built on lies. He probably took out a predatory loan to pull this off, and Anaya will be the one paying for it for the rest of her life." This was the final piece, the line he had just crossed. He wasn't just attacking me. He was painting a future of misery for the woman I loved, trying to poison our life together before it even began. He was trying to instill fear. It was time. I gave Ania's hand one last reassuring squeeze and let go. I took a step forward, closing the distance between myself and Julian. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "Julian," I said, my voice cutting through the tense air with quiet authority. "I appreciate your concern for Anaya's well-being. It's touching. But you've been operating under some incorrect assumptions." I looked past him, my eyes scanning the crowd until I found the man I was looking for. "Mr. Davies, could you come over here for a moment, please?" A man in a sharp black suit immediately detached himself from the edge of the crowd and walked towards us. This was Thomas Davies, the general manager of the Vantage Point. He was a tall, distinguished black man in his late 40s, with smooth ebony skin and a shaved head that gleamed under the terrace lights. His expression was one of pure, unflappable professionalism. "Yes, Mr. Carter," he said, his voice respectful. Julian scoffed. "Oh, what's this? You're going to have the manager throw me out? How original." I ignored him. "Mr. Davies," I said, "there seems to be some confusion about my ability to afford your beautiful venue. Julian here believes I'm a charity case. Could you perhaps clarify for my guests who paid the bill for tonight's event?" Mr. Davies looked from me to Julian, his face a mask of polite neutrality, but I could see a glint of something else in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps. "There is no bill, Mr. Carter," he said clearly. A confused murmur rippled through the party. Althea's eyes narrowed. Julian laughed out loud. "No bill? What, did you wash dishes to pay for it? Did you promise them exposure on your broke-ass Instagram page?" "There is no bill," Mr. Davies repeated, this time directing his words to the entire assembly, "because one does not typically pay to host an event in a property one owns." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier, deeper, and more profound than before. You could have heard a diamond drop on the marble floor. Julian's smug grin froze, then slowly melted from his face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of disbelief. "Owns?" Althea's voice was a shocked whisper. "I'm sorry," Julian stammered, his bravado finally cracking. "What did you just say? What do you mean, owns?" I gave him a placid smile. "Things aren't always what they appear, Julian. If you're already seeing where this is going, hit that like button right now, and comment below. What do you think David should do? Should they reveal the truth or keep watching? Let me know your prediction. Now, what happens next changes everything." The truth was, I hadn't been a freelance graphic designer for almost 8 years. That was how I started, in a tiny apartment with a second-hand laptop and a mountain of student debt. But I was good at it, and more importantly, I was smart with my money. I saved every penny. While my peers were buying new cars and designer clothes, I was investing. My first big break came when I designed a logo and branding package for a small tech startup. Instead of a flat fee, I negotiated for a small percentage of equity. At the time, it seemed like a foolish gamble. 6 months later, that startup was acquired by a major tech conglomerate, and my 2% equity stake was suddenly worth $1.5 million. I didn't cash out and buy a Lamborghini. I took that money and founded Carter Holdings, a private real estate investment firm. I started small, buying up undervalued commercial properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. I had a good eye for it. I saw potential where others saw decay. Over the next 5 years, I worked relentlessly, keeping my head down and my profile low. I learned everything I could about commercial real estate, about leveraging assets, about corporate structures and tax law. My little firm grew, quietly and exponentially. That freelance profile Julian found. I kept it active on purpose. It was my cover, my way of moving through the world without the baggage and assumptions that came with wealth. It was also a test. When I met Ania, I was already a very wealthy man. But I had seen what money did to people. I had seen how it changed relationships, how it attracted the wrong kind of attention. I wanted someone who would love David Carter, the quiet, creative guy who loved old jazz records and spending weekends hiking, not David Carter, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. So I told her I was a freelance graphic designer. It wasn't a lie. I still took on a few projects now and then to keep my skills sharp, and, more importantly, to maintain my cover. For 3 years, our relationship grew. It was beautiful and real. But in the background, there was always the shadow of her family's expectations and the ghost of her ex, Julian. Julian was everything they thought a successful black man should be. Flashy, outspoken, and branded from head to toe. I was the opposite. I wore simple, well-made clothes, drove a reliable but unassuming car, and lived in a comfortable but modest condo. The contrast was a constant source of friction. Althea's disapproval was the most overt. Ania has worked so hard to build her career, she'd say over family dinners. She needs a partner who is her equal, someone who can help elevate her, not hold her back. The implication was always clear. I was the one holding her back. I never defended myself. I never corrected their assumptions. I just smiled and said, "We manage." I was playing the long game. I wanted to be sure, absolutely sure, that Ania's love for me was stronger than her family's ambition for her. I needed to know if she would choose me, the man, over the illusion of success that Julian represented. Tonight was the culmination of that test. Julian, in his infinite arrogance, had unwittingly become the final exam. Back on the rooftop, the air was thick with unspoken questions. Ania was staring at me, her beautiful brown eyes wide with a mixture of confusion, shock, and a dawning, incredible hope. She took a step toward me, her hand reaching for mine again. "David," she whispered. "What is he talking about? You own this building?" Before I could answer, Julian found his voice again, a shrill, desperate sound. "That's impossible. This is a trick. You're lying. The Omni Tower is owned by a massive corporate entity, not some $50 an hour nobody." "He is correct about that," I said calmly, turning my attention back to him. "The Omni Tower is indeed owned by a corporation, a real estate holding company to be specific. It's called Carter Holdings." I let my name hang in the air. I saw the exact moment the realization hit Derek, Ania's brother. His eyes widened, and a slow grin spread across his face. He understood. Althea, however, was still catching up. "Carter Holdings? I've never heard of it." The dismissal in her voice was automatic, a reflex honed by years of judging others. "I'm not surprised," I said. "We prefer to maintain a low profile. We find it's better for business." I then looked toward the bar and gave a slight nod. My friend and lawyer, Marcus Thorne, began to walk toward us. Marcus Thorne was 36 years old, the sharpest legal mind I had ever met. He was a tall, impeccably dressed black man with a dark chocolate complexion and a clean-shaven head that made him look both intellectual and intimidating. He wore thin-rimmed glasses that framed intelligent, focused eyes. He carried a sleek leather portfolio under his arm. "Julian Vance, I presume," Marcus said, his voice smooth and professional as he stopped beside me. He didn't offer to shake Julian's hand. "Who are you?" Julian snapped, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am Mr. Carter's legal counsel," Marcus said. He opened his portfolio. "And since you seem so concerned with Mr. Carter's financial affairs, he has authorized me to clarify a few things for you and for all of these concerned guests." The stage was now perfectly set. Every eye was on us. The jazz trio had long since fallen silent, and the only sound was the distant hum of city traffic far below. "We're about to reach the moment you've been waiting for. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs to see karma in action. Because what David does next, Julian never saw it coming." Marcus pulled out the first document with a soft rustle of paper. "This," he announced, holding it up, "is the deed and title for this property, the Omni Tower at 1450 Peachtree Street. As you can see, the owner is listed as Carter Holdings, LLC." He then produced a second document. "And this is the official corporate filing for Carter Holdings, which lists the founder, president, and sole shareholder as Mr. David Michael Carter." He placed the documents on a nearby cocktail table right in front of Julian. The black ink on the crisp white paper seemed to scream the truth. Julian stared at them, his face ashen. He looked from the papers to me, his eyes filled with a dawning horror. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible," I said softly. "You know, for a man who claims to be a business prodigy, your due diligence is remarkably poor. You found a freelance profile from 8 years ago and stopped digging. You saw what you wanted to see. You saw a man you could easily dismiss, a man you considered beneath you." I took a step closer to him, my voice still low and even, yet it carried across the silent terrace. "You called me a charity case, Julian. But charity cases don't typically have a commercial real estate portfolio valued at over $800 million. They don't own 12 commercial high-rises across 3 states. And they certainly don't own the building where their fiancé's arrogant ex-boyfriend leases his office space." That last sentence landed like a physical blow. Julian recoiled as if I had struck him. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Anya gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Wait, your office, Julian? It's in the Phoenix building downtown, isn't it?" I nodded slowly. "The very same. Carter Holdings acquired that property about 18 months ago." Marcus, ever the professional, produced another document from his portfolio. "And on that subject," he said, his tone grim, "we have the matter of Innovate AI, Mr. Vance's company. According to our records, your company is currently 3 months in arrears on its lease payments for the 34th floor of the Phoenix building. The total outstanding amount is $112,450. The crowd erupted in a symphony of shocked gasps and murmurs. Julian's disruptor tech company, the foundation of his entire identity, was failing. He wasn't the titan of industry he pretended to be. He was just another founder living on borrowed time and other people's money. "We were, in fact," Marcus continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "scheduled to serve your office with a formal eviction notice tomorrow morning. But since you were so kind as to join us tonight, consider yourself served." The humiliation was total and absolute. Julian's face, which had been a mask of smug superiority just minutes before, was now a crumpled mess of disbelief, panic, and shame. His golden-brown skin seemed to have lost its luster, appearing pale and clammy under the elegant party lights. His 2 friends, Kevin and Marcus, who had been standing behind him like proud soldiers, now looked like they wanted the marble floor to swallow them whole. They took several awkward steps back, distancing themselves from the train wreck. "This is a lie, a setup," Julian finally managed to croak, his voice cracking. He looked desperately at Anaya, his eyes pleading. "Anaya, you can't believe this. He's trying to ruin me." Anaya looked from Julian's pathetic, crumbling facade to me, her future husband, standing calm and resolute. I saw 1,000 emotions flash across her face: confusion, hurt, anger, and finally, a profound and unshakable clarity. She had been caught between two worlds, the one her family and Julian represented, built on appearances and loud declarations of worth, and the one I had offered her, built on quiet strength, patience, and a love that didn't need a price tag. In that moment, she finally chose. She stepped forward, positioning herself firmly at my side, and faced her ex-boyfriend. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and cold as ice. "The only person who tried to ruin anything tonight was you, Julian," she said, her words sharp and precise. "You came into our home. Yes, our home, because wherever David is, that is my home. And you tried to humiliate the man I love. You tried to tear him down, to build yourself up. You didn't do this out of concern for me. You did it because your fragile ego couldn't handle the fact that I chose him, that I moved on, that I'm happy." She took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over her stunned parents and the silent guests. "For years I have listened to people judge this man based on what they thought they saw. They saw his simple clothes, his modest car, his quiet nature, and they decided he wasn't good enough. They never once bothered to look deeper. They never saw his kindness, his integrity, his unwavering support for me and my dreams. They never saw his brilliance because they were too blinded by their own shallow expectations." Her eyes landed on her mother. "You, Mom, you were the worst of all. You called him a charity case. You judged him without ever trying to know him." Althea flinched, her regal composure finally cracking. She looked down, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. Anaya turned back to Julian. "You talk about him being a fraud. You are the fraud, Julian. You built your entire identity on a company that can't even pay its rent. You project an image of success while you're drowning. David never had to project anything. His success is quiet, it's real, and it's his. He didn't need to show it off to feel worthy. And I love him for that." She looked at me then, and the love and pride in her eyes was so powerful, it took my breath away. "I love him," she said, her voice softening. "David Carter, the man. Not his bank account, not his properties, not his company. Him." With that, she turned back to Julian one last time. "Now get out of my engagement party, and don't you ever dare speak to me or my fiancé again." It was a complete and utter victory, not a victory of money or power, but of character and truth. Julian stood there, utterly defeated, the architect of his own public execution. The security guards for the venue, who had been alerted by Mr. Davies, appeared at the entrance to the terrace. They were two large, professional black men in sharp suits, their presence signaling the end of the show. They walked over to Julian. "Sir, you're going to have to come with us," one of them said in a low, firm voice. Julian didn't resist. He was a deflated balloon, all the hot air gone. He allowed them to escort him away, his head bowed in shame. His two friends scurried after him like frightened mice. As he passed me, he risked one last look in my direction. There was no anger left in his eyes, only a hollow, bottomless despair. He had tried to expose me, and in the end, the only thing he had exposed was the empty, rotting core of his own life. I turned to Anaya and pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her hair. She held me tightly, her body trembling slightly. The party around us slowly began to buzz again, but it was a different kind of energy now, one of awe, respect, and a little bit of fear. I had just redrawn the map of their entire social world. I looked over Anaya's shoulder at her parents. Robert, her father, was looking at me with a newfound, profound respect. He gave me a slow, deliberate nod. But Althea, her face was a complex mask of shame, regret, and a dawning, terrifying understanding of how badly she had misjudged everything. Our relationship would never be the same, but for the first time, it had a chance to be real. I held my fiancée, the woman who had chosen me when I was supposedly nothing, and I knew, without a single doubt, that our foundation was built not on money or property, but on something far more valuable and unbreakable. If this story reminded you that you should never judge someone by appearances, and that karma always finds a way, hit subscribe and leave a comment below. What would you have done in David's position? I read every comment. Now let's see how their story ends. 6 months later, Ania and I were married. We didn't have a big, lavish wedding. We flew to a small private island in the Caribbean with a handful of our closest friends and family, those who had loved and supported us from the beginning. Derek was my best man. Ania's father, Robert, walked her down the sandy aisle, his eyes shining with pride. Althea was there too. She was quieter now, more reserved. In the weeks following the engagement party, she had offered me a stilted, tearful apology. She admitted she had been blinded by her own insecurities and her obsession with status. "I was wrong, David," she had said, her voice thick with emotion. "I failed to see the good man right in front of my daughter. I hope in time you can forgive me." I told her that forgiveness wasn't mine to give, but that a fresh start was. Our relationship was still a work in progress, but it was healing. She was finally getting to know me, the real me, and was beginning to see that my greatest asset was never my net worth, but my love for her daughter. Tonight, Ania and I stood on the balcony of our new home. It was a penthouse apartment that took up the entire top floor of the Omni Tower, the same building where our engagement party had been held. We had moved in a month after the wedding. From this height, the city of Atlanta was a breathtaking tapestry of light and energy spread out beneath us. Anaya, my wife, leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. She wore one of my simple cotton shirts, her long braids tied back in a loose bun. Her caramel skin glowed in the moonlight. "It's still hard to believe," she murmured, her eyes tracing the lines of the city, "that all of this is ours." "It's just a building, baby," I said, kissing the top of her head. "You are my home." She smiled, a real contented smile that reached her eyes. "I know, but it's a nice building." We laughed together, a comfortable, easy sound. The tension that had once been a silent third partner in our relationship was gone, replaced by an unshakable trust. She no longer worried about what her family thought, or what the world saw. She knew my heart, and that was enough. As for Julian, his downfall was as swift as it was predictable. After being evicted from his office, his financial troubles became public knowledge. His investors, already nervous about the company's lack of profitability, pulled their funding. Innovate AI collapsed within a month. The last we heard, he had moved back in with his parents in another state, his reputation in Atlanta's tech scene utterly destroyed. He had built his castle on sand, and the tide of truth had washed it all away. I felt no joy in his ruin, only a quiet sense of justice. He had been given a harsh but necessary lesson in humility. I looked down at the vibrant city below. For years, I had moved through it like a ghost, my true self hidden from view. I had built an empire in silence, not for the power or the prestige, but for the freedom it would one day afford me and my family. The freedom to live on our own terms, to define our own success, and to be impervious to the shallow judgments of the world. Ania turned in my arms to face me, her hands coming up to cup my face. Her eyes were serious now, filled with a deep, enduring love. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being patient," she said. "For giving me the time to see clearly. For trusting me to choose you." There was never any doubt, I told her. and it was the honest truth. I had never doubted her heart. I had only been waiting for her to trust it as much as I did. I had spent years enduring the whispers and the condescending looks, all to build a life founded on something real. People like Julian and Althea believed that worth was something you wore, something you drove, something you announced to the world. They were wrong. True worth isn't in what you own or what people see. It's in your character, your integrity, and the quiet strength you hold when no one is watching. I didn't need to prove my value to them. I just needed to reveal the truth, and the truth in the end always speaks for itself.